This week's episode of Screen Talk is brought to you by A24, presenting the movie Room, awards eligible in all categories, including Best Picture. Currently nominated for 3 Golden Globe Awards, 2 SAG Awards, 3 Independent Spirit Awards, and 4 Broadcast Film Critics Awards, Room is now playing in select theaters. I'm Eric Cohn, the Deputy Editor and Chief Film Critic, joined as always by Ann Thompson from Thompson in Hollywood, and we have so many movies to discuss this week because it's the big holiday movie weekend. Christmas is right around the corner, and we've been anticipating this for weeks. There's Hateful Eight, there's Joy, there's The Revenant. What to make of this crowded marketplace when you already have Star Wars, plus other kinds of things that you might want to check out, and where do you begin? Ann Thompson, where do you begin with this busy holiday weekend?
Well, there's an embarrassment of riches, but what I really want people to do is to go to the theaters, I mean, Hateful Eight in 70 millimeter gorgeous. You've never seen anything like it. Whatever you think of the movie, it looks fabulous. And
Sounds good too.
And everything. There's Ennio Morricone, and then if you go to The Revenant, which was another amazingly gorgeous, incredibly crafted movie, no matter how hard it was for the people who made it, the end results are fabulous. And you end up, looking at Chivo Lubeski and this amazing Alexa camera that has never been used before, that's up close. You know what I figured out? Did we talk about this? That the aesthetic, the cinematic aesthetic of The Revenant is similar to Tangerine. In other words, you have the close-up camera, the digital camera that's right on top of Leo as he's riding away from those
Also shot in
Native Americans.
And shot in natural
And shot
light.
in natural light. There's a lot. I find it fascinating to think about, some of the ways that so many of the movies that are opening relate, to one another. Either they're filmmakers who are pushing the edges of what's been done in film in order to wow us in some way, which you could argue both Tarantino and Inarritu have done, or they're just pushing the technology to a new place. Wouldn't you agree?
Well, one of the things that I really liked about last weekend with Star Wars opening and everybody getting really excited about that was that it's sort of a consolidated what people get excited about in the movies when they go to the theater. Even if it wasn't, necessarily the best movie of the year, there's so much about kind of the visual experience that only a big screen and a certain kind of vision can give you.
I want to go back and see Star Wars with a real audience, because I think you're absolutely right. And I think that part of it, it's not just seeing it. I saw it at a big theater with lots of people at the premiere, at the world premiere, she said gleefully. But I would still like to see it with real fans, because that is what that's all about. And it's a very satisfying, enjoyable experience, even if I didn't put it on my 10 best.
Right. But opening as sort of a very much extreme counter-programming last weekend with Son of Saul, both of our favorite movies of the year. Another kind of experience that I think on some level it's tapping into some kind of an immediate appeal, even if it's hard to draw a connection between those two experiences. That there's
immediate appeal isn't the word I would use for Son of Saul.
Well,
I would say
it's very visceral.
Something like, yes, I would say something like, for anyone who wants, I would compare it to Inarritu and Tarantino in the sense that any self-respecting cinephile who wants to experience something in the cinema that they've never experienced before should see Son of Saul. Appealing isn't the word. It's about being immersed in a horrifying reality that only cinema can give you.
I agree with that to some extent, but I also felt like maybe those kinds of expectations or those kinds of reactions are only a gateway to the other kinds of experiences that this movie is willing to offer up, which was why I found it to be more of a thriller almost, more dramatically involving than that sort of gravitas might suggest. Though,
yes, because you're caught up in his mission. He's
right.
On a mission,
The
and there's
immediacy of it.
and there's a mystery to it as well. You know,
Right.
who is Saul? Who is this kid? And why is he so determined? And you figure it out as you go along. And because you're following him very closely, very blinkered in a very blinkered way, um, you get to have an entirely different tour, if you like, of Auschwitz
Right. Well,
than you've ever had.
the speculative nature is such an intrinsic element to great storytelling. We were seeing it in all of these movies that we're talking about. Obviously, all the fan theories circulating about Star Wars and the different story elements. But if you look at Hateful Eight, here's another great example where you see that movie once and you figure out different kinds of motivations towards the end with all these different characters in the cabin. You could technically go back and see a different kind of movie once you understand those things. And I like this idea of constructing stories in which the more you watch it or the more you stick with it, the more this world opens itself up so that you have to go back and think it through in more detail.
I
And
want to see Hateful Eight again as well in the new, shorter multiplex version,
what
which
is
is
it like? I was going to say 5 minutes.
23 minutes. No,
23?
it's 23 minutes shorter.
Still close to 3 hours.
Because you have 4 minutes. I actually spoke to Tarantino yesterday. He had his star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, and I nailed him down, you know. So there's 4 minutes of overture, 12 minutes of intermission. So, and then yeah, anyway, we went over so he previewed the multiplex version in Long Beach, and he said, "What genre is this movie?" And they all came up with mystery. And
Yeah,
I think that's true.
it makes it, it's like an Agatha Christie type of story, almost like a
Yeah,
whodunit, who poisoned
that's
the
really what
coffee.
it is.
Yeah.
It's
No,
not really, there's gore, but he says, of course, there's Western and action and a little bit of horror, a little bit of gore. But finally, I would say mostly it's a mystery.
right. But it's also more than anything else a Quentin Tarantino movie. I mean, what people are going to turn out for is a certain kind of expectation that no other filmmaker can stimulate. Almost the same way that people turn out for a Star Wars movie. I mean, it's a universe of sorts that is so uncompromising in terms of the way the language unfolds, the certain kinds of personality types, and also just the way that he plays with history, I think is just so much fun.
It is, but I have to say, of all his films, this is the first time he's sort of gotten away with who he is all these years, and this is the first time that I'm seeing a slight shift, a slight backlash.
Well, it's more sadistic in certain ways, and it's more, I think,
It's
cynical.
also what is it all about kind of thing. You know,
Sure,
what do you get at the end? What do you
sure.
wind up with? What do you learn, you know?
Well, there's no way around the issues pertaining to race and American identity that are embedded in the character types that populate this movie in the most extreme fashion with Samuel L. Jackson's character, who I think is going to be somebody worth pontificating about. The think pieces write themselves. In some ways, it's almost like the character was written to stimulate those kinds of think pieces.
Absolutely, and I think there's a lot to be said for that conversation. It's the I think what he's doing is he's throwing you in with these characters and throwing them at each other and setting up all of these dynamics and then playing it out in the last act. And that's one of the reasons I want to see the multiplex version because I believe I bet it plays even better
Well, it would have
without
to.
without the all that other roadshow stuff. And he took out some of the minutes, some of the roadshow minutes that were added on, like 6 minutes added on,
Yeah,
7 minutes.
I would like to know what the differences are. I mean, I imagine it's still a movie that has a certain kind of excess in its DNA, just based on the way that story is structured. I mean, come on, the first hour is in a stagecoach, the next two are in a cabin, and all kinds of wacky stuff happens, including a random use of voiceover narration that crops up something
Which I
like,
object to, which I
yeah,
think doesn't work, which is Tarantino's own voice.
right. So
And then
there,
and then there's a flashback in the last act also, which I also have issues with. So
yeah.
so because he's violating the purity of the theatrical experience that he created. And he admits that he wants this to be a play. On some level, he wrote it as a play. He never has written any other movie this way before.
Right. So this movie comes out. By the time people listen to this, it already will be out. So it's getting a little bit ahead of the holidays. I think one of the things that's worth noting about something like The Hateful Eight is that there's so much movie there, and if you're going to plop down money and go out with your
You
family or
get your
friends,
money's worth,
yeah,
right? Well, it's not a family entertainment exactly.
depends on the family, but yeah, basically, I
Older
mean,
children.
yes, exactly.
R-rated.
It's R rated, and also it's asking a lot of certain types of sensibilities. But what else would you go to? It would be Star
By the way, I
Wars.
want to say something. I was just looking it up. It's 82 on Metacritic, which is very high. That's extremely high. That would be in the same level as his other films, I would think. But I bet it's lower by the time all the critics weigh in
Also,
tomorrow.
remember with something like Metacritic, that's an arbitrary number that's the result of how Metacritic looks at reviews and assigns numbers to reviews.
And there's only 16 critics so far.
But also, what's fascinating about Tarantino and critics is that there's
I'm
always
going over to Tomatoes. I want to see what they say. Go ahead.
the tomato meter.
This one's higher. This one's 87. Wow.
Because I think critics have a hard time putting down Tarantino. Speaking as one myself, I mean, even though the last few movies I've had issues with, there's always something to admire about the singularity of vision, about the love of movies, about the energy and the attitude. There's an eagerness to please and a certain vanity to it that's sort of a meta
I
thriller
agree
in a
with that.
way.
That's very well said, Eric.
Well, he gets away with so much. And you're
I
watching these
know.
movies and it's like, wow, can anybody else do this today? I mean, in a world where Star Wars is back and when you're a new filmmaker, the best thing to do is supposedly to find the best paying gig or go to TV. Somebody like Tarantino has made 8 movies and is one of the biggest brands in the filmmaking world.
But he's pure and he's admired for that. Very much admired by everyone for, not capitulating and not, listening to other voices. He's only listening to his own voice. And there's something to be said for that, but there may be, maybe there was room for a couple of other voices in this case, in my humble op. I think you do get, kind of caught in your own bubble sometimes. I'm on Rotten Tomatoes. So Joy is 61%. It's actually
Not
down
bad.
there with Concussion. That's pretty bad.
Is it
for
bad?
that
When
for a
does it
David O. Russell
for David
movie?
O. Russell? But 60, and once you're up to 70, people say you're doing okay, right? That's how the logic works these days.
Exactly. Exactly. So The Big Short, which I saw for the second time because this is the late-breaking movie with momentum in the Oscar race. It's a phenomenon that I have observed many times, and I recognize that that's what's going on, and Paramount's pushing it really hard. And I keep sort of coming up short on, and I played it for my family, so we all watched it together, Nora and David and I, and what it just doesn't look or feel like an Oscar movie, and yet I bet it's going to be an enormous hit, and it opens tomorrow.
Yeah, I mean, I keep hearing from
It's at
different people.
85.
We got into this last week. I mean, there are certainly plenty of people who are not super into this movie, but it plays as a comedy about a bigger issue, which we don't see very often, and it's something that is dealing with an issue in recent memory, the housing crisis. And so in that sense, it's almost like there's been enough time since that's happened where we can deal with it this way, sort of
But
in a
what I
playful
got
way.
from, yeah, exactly. And what I got, and I think I'm more impressed, even more impressed with Christian Bale. Of all of them, they're all good, but he and Steve Carell. But the what I got from my family is that they were really intent. They were paying very close attention, and they were learning a lot about something that they did not know about. And that may be the factor that sort
Do you
of
think
makes a
that they
difference.
do you think they really learned something, or did they just feel like they were learning something because Selena Gomez was telling them about it?
No,
Um,
I think because they kept asking me questions. I had already seen it, so that Nora kept asking me, what about that? So I would say they're about to explain that or something. That's good. That's a good thing. I still think it's a sort of a hideous looking movie, but whatever. And then I watched Jennifer Lawrence for the entire hour on Charlie Rose, and I thought Charlie Rose was actually very brave
it's probably more
to do
exciting
that.
to watch than Joy, right?
No, I like Joy better than that. I do. I do. I think she carries it. I think it's incredibly entertaining. It's just it's as we said, it's David O. Russell competing with himself at this point.
I thought that the problem with Joy was that there just wasn't enough movie there. You get individual scenes where you realize what you're watching. I mean, he just writes really swift dialogue. It can be very fun, and the premise is intriguing in certain ways, but it just kind of fizzles. I mean, I just wasn't with it all the way to the end, and it felt like the ending was abrupt. And there's
He
just
didn't give
no.
us exactly what we want. What I think happened here, and perhaps he needed more time in the editing room or something. I think he's got this. I think he walks a tightrope where he's trying to push the movie into some greater, fabulous, you know, idiosyncratic yet entertaining place. And in this case, he pushed it and didn't get there. He didn't find it. He didn't get the magic structure that he needed. And so at the end, we're left sort of dissatisfied. That's the problem.
Well, the idiosyncratic device in the movie, and the only one that I thought had maybe some potential, was the use of these soap operas, which end up informing the character's life, or her dream life of sorts, or she has nightmares about them sometimes, and that was the only time where I saw a filmmaker actually reaching to do something kind of beyond just writing some strong lines and some funny scenes. And the character is inherently interesting because of the backdrop of the TV industry of the early 90s, and the way in which that kind of informs the success that she's chasing after. So that there is something embedded
It's
in the
fun to go
material.
back to
Yeah.
QVC.
It's
Yeah,
it's it's,
yeah.
it's I think that that's worth looking at, but it just doesn't feel like, I mean, you compare it to.
Also, it's not a romantic comedy. Thank you very much. So it's
No.
not about that. It's about
No.
this woman realizing her potential, and despite the family that's trying to drag her down,
Right.
having the strength and the conviction to sort of push herself where she wants to go. I think there's a lot to be said for this movie, actually. Even if I'm not raving about it or putting it on my 10 best, or I think it's almost unfortunate that it has to be in any kind of awards conversation, except for, of course, Lawrence. She'll be there.
Well, she's a great actress, and she does what she can with the material. Sometimes it's just a look or a put down, or whatever. I mean, she's just got a very individualistic screen presence. But a
It
movie
was
like this.
interesting listening to her talk about her specific relationship with David O. Russell. She gives him a lot of credit for pulling these performances out of her that she
But
didn't
do
know
we
she
think
could give.
is that real, or is that
I
just?
think so. I think it is.
I always question that sort of thing. I mean, there's just so much kind of handshake deal of sorts about how you talk about the filmmaker, and the collaboration and so forth. I mean, she just seems like.
She seems to believe it. I mean, Jennifer isn't the kind of person, listen to me talking. Jennifer Lawrence isn't the kind of person that goes, she doesn't blow a lot of smoke. She's attempting to be authentic.
So is she enough for people to go see this movie? Because it seems to me like it's just going to get steamrolled by the more kind of extreme competition, whether it's Tarantino or.
It's the movie for women. I mean, that and Sisters, which didn't get very good reviews. So I think women are going to flock to this. I think a lot of people will go. I think it'll play. I think it'll do well.
Doesn't The Big Short? Well, it doesn't have a lot of women roles, but doesn't, I mean, that's
It
the
sure
common.
doesn't.
Yeah, but it does seem like that one would be have an easier time kind of standing out in the crowd than something like Joy, just because
Doesn't
of.
Joy seem different than other films to you? It's not like every other film.
I mean, I don't know. I just I see that one sheet with Jennifer Lawrence, and it seems like it's just her that they're selling for this movie, and there's no other kind of hook. And maybe that's enough, but
Well, isn't that how you sell a Tom Cruise movie? Isn't that how you sell a
the people.
Harrison Ford movie? You sell the star. That's what you do.
I
That's
mean,
the asset. That's what the star is. It's a movie star.
it seems like this year we're seeing more and more kind of brands being sold, right? I mean,
Star Wars is a
Creed, Star
brand.
Wars.
Creed is a brand. Although I give Coogler credit for coming up with an original idea that no one else had come up with. I mean, that franchise was definitely dead. The door was closed, and of course MGM had every reason to want to revive it again when he presented it to them. Stallone thought the door was closed, and he finally came around. So they did it, and it's an organic, legitimate, authentic version of an extension of that story. I love it. I love Creed.
And that should probably hold over through the holidays, right?
That'll do. It's already done $87 million. It's going to continue
Amazing.
to do well, though at the expense probably of Ron Howard's In the Heart of the Sea,
Oh,
which if I were Warner Brothers, I would let that go
it's gone. I
and
mean,
give the theaters to Creed. They could make a lot more money with that movie.
yeah, no, that one came and went pretty quick, I think. Although I will say, if there is one lure for the that substantial amount of women audiences and its joy, I wish there was some way to shave off some of that and send them to 45 years, which is opening this week as well.
That's for the art house adult audience, and I hope they see it too. It's wonderful, wonderful movie.
And
And
so
that
many
was on
people.
my 10 best list.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So I mean, there's a movie that I would like to see more people paying attention to, just because it works for more audiences than I think a lot of the stuff we're talking about. You know, it's like you could not be a Hateful Eight person and you could be a 45 years person. You could not be a Son of Saul person and be a 45 years person. You could not care for The Big Short. I mean,
I'd
it's
send people to see The Lady in the Van too. I think, especially Anglophiles. It's based on a play, and it's got this extraordinary performance by Maggie Smith. And I would send people to see Youth with this extraordinary performance by Michael Caine, who was on 60 Minutes this week, and delightfully so.
Yeah, that's another one where I mean, we started talking about that movie back in May, so I'm really curious to hear what you think about how this movie is standing out at this point. I mean, everybody likes Michael Caine. We know that, 82-year-old
Not
veteran.
really. I
But
mean, SAG didn't do it, and the Golden Globes didn't do it either. So I'm looking. This is a case where I'm looking to the Oscars to come through for Charlotte Rampling. Now they both won at the European Film Awards. That tells you something. That's where the that's where the support lies for youth. But the Academy is very European in a way that SAG is not, and the Academy is more refined in their taste than SAG or the Golden Globes. So we'll see.
so there's a couple other question marks now. I mean, Hateful Eight is one where, I mean, I'm thinking back with Django, how that didn't seem like an obvious big Oscar movie to everybody, but it did a lot better than that. I mean, it won an Oscar for
I don't
Tarantino.
think this one is playing as well. I just, it's possible that he could get into for screenplay and that Jennifer Jason Leigh could get in for supporting actress. And I don't think he gets director. I don't think he makes it to the top five. And I'm not sure Hateful Eight makes it to the top 10 in this particular case.
What about Samuel L. Jackson? I thought he was better than he's been in years in
I
that lead
couldn't
role.
agree more. I couldn't agree more. But remember, the best actor category is pretty tight this year. Pretty bad.
It's, well, bad or just a crowded
Competitive.
field. It's
Look,
actually
I'd put Samuel Jackson in over Eddie Redmayne in a
right.
heartbeat. But I mean, everybody, if Eddie Redmayne gets SAG and the Golden Globes, we have to assume he's going to get in there.
It's the same situation with Bryan Cranston for Trumbo, right?
I'm not so sure that follows. I mean, it
Hmm.
doesn't follow 100%. I still think that the Academy looks at I think they like Trumbo, but I think it's possible that Trumbo won't get anything.
And how about Concussion? That's a movie that you were kind of dismissive of back at when it
I'm
premiered at AFI.
still I'm still dismissive.
Because I just noticed that in my massive screener pile that just kind of built up over the last few weeks as all these things showed up on my doorstep. That's one I still haven't seen. So I'm trying.
I
I'm
don't
on the
think you
fence.
need to. I mean, I would say let that go.
But is there some audience for this movie that's? I mean, I have
No, it could do
seen
some
it.
business. I mean, I think people who love football, who
Yeah,
care about the issue, who love Will Smith, it's a perfectly well-made, reasonably, moderately watchable movie. I'm Peter Landsman is the director, and I think it's a little bit, by the numbers. He's a journalist. He's not He's not what I would call a vivid filmmaker.
But they've been advertising it during football games, so I have sports friends have asked me about it, and they see Will Smith, and the story is intriguing. It's come out more and more, I think, just in the last few months, and just the research that this guy did involving head trauma and so forth is something that people are taking seriously.
Well, if you want to talk about it, then you should see it.
All I'm saying is that I'm sensing some kind of interest in this movie that it's not completely gone.
It's an agitprop movie. It's a movie that's advocating a position. It's a movie that's arguing and in a little bit. I mean, in a little bit like The Big Short or Spotlight. It has an agenda. It's trying to tell us a story that it thinks is important for us to know, and it's more concerned about the point it wants to make than it is in serving an audience with a heartfelt drama.
Right. And anyway, those kinds of people will probably just go see Star Wars anyway. So, I mean,
You shouldn't say that. There are a lot of people who are gonna like to see Will Smith in a football controversy.
but then
it's
they
not
have to
in the
decide,
awards
you want to
conversation.
see
That's
Will
all I'm
Smith
saying.
football movie or Han Solo? I mean,
Yeah,
you know.
they've already seen it. They've already seen Star
Well,
Wars.
I just keep coming back
That's
to
about
this.
repeat business again.
Yeah, I mean, I know the movie broke all these records and so forth. I'm curious to see what sort of legs it has now that it's a real thing in the world and not, just marketing materials that are fanning all kinds of speculation. I mean, now this franchise is off to the races, but the movie's going to be around for a long time. What sort of drop off are we going to
It will
expect?
have a big drop off, but it's still the holidays. It's still that incredibly intense Christmas week where everybody's out of school and everybody's out of work and each day is like a Saturday. That's why the numbers are going to be so big and there will be repeat business. They handled it perfectly. They put it out a week earlier than most Christmas movies when there was no competition at all. Now all these other movies are opening, but it's already been launched and it's going to do really well. The question is whether it does so at the expense of the other movies and doesn't, but some of these are limited. The Revenant and Hateful Eight are fairly limited.
What about Point Break?
The word on that is that it's. I saw some footage of it at CinemaCon. I haven't gone to the movie because I've been told it's not very
Yeah.
good. And the word is that it's going to die out there. It's nothing to do with the original Catherine Bigelow, Keanu Reeves,
Yeah.
Patrick Swayze movie. It which was pretty much about surfers and who were robbing banks and stuff.
Right.
But this is about real extreme sports. And I did see some footage, amazing footage of these people flying down a canyon with those wings that you can have, and it was pretty stunning. But they have surfing and they have wing gliding or whatever that's called, and
It
and
just
other
looks like
things.
there was some sort of miscalculation here when you look at the overall set of movies that are opening this coming long weekend, that somebody thought that this would be sort of the fun, light counter programming to maybe some of the heavier fall season movies or something, or maybe they just dumped it here because they had no other place to put it. But
What it felt like when I saw the footage and talked to the people in CinemaCon was that the studio thought that this would be compelling enough visual filmmaking, with something people maybe had never seen before on the big screen, big extreme sports writ large. And that would be something to pull them into the theater. That's what they're always looking for is something big, an event. Now they hired a cinematographer guy, a sports guy. I mean, I don't know that it again, it may not have been final. I haven't seen it, so I can't say. Wait, here, let's look. Let's see. Well, what is the score for
because that's all that
Point
matters.
Break?
All that matters at the end of the day are those damn numbers and ratings, and whether or not any
Oh,
of
they
this
haven't
stuff.
allowed this to be reviewed yet. They're holding off. No score.
It's because it's so good that it's beyond criticism. I mean, I'm sure it's a similar situation with Daddy's Home, the Will Ferrell Mark Wahlberg movie, which is also opening over the holiday weekend, and will probably pull in some kind of a male-dominated crowd looking for a raucous
Oh
comedy.
God, you couldn't pay me to go see that. That's at 38% on
I
Rotten
mean,
Tomatoes.
but those sort of
And Alvin and the
things.
Chipmunks is at 13%.
I mean, we're inundated with so many kinds of possibilities where the movie is an afterthought, right? It's just marketing materials in which people plan social outings around, and then whether or not the movie's good, some part of our culture doesn't really care. I mean, they don't want to be entertained in a very active way or stimulated in a big way. They just want something that is mildly amusing. But you have to hold out hope that there is some larger audience that, or some significant audience that wants something that's at least going to give them a unique experience. I mean, I would say the two best bets for the holiday weekend are Hateful Eight and The Revenant. Um,
Right.
Even if you're a family with people who are afraid of violence or whatever. I mean, it's just sort of like maybe take a shot with something a little bit more challenging. The Big
I
Short
thought you were
maybe.
telling them to take a shot of alcohol in order to handle it.
Well, it
By the way,
depends. That's the
45
future.
years is at 98% on Rotten Tomatoes.
Look, in an ideal world, the two best movies you should be seeing over
Our
this long
Son of
weekend.
Saul in 45
Yeah.
years.
So let's end on that note and hope that people will take our advice. If they can't see these movies in places near them, then they'll just have to reenact them at home or something. But we wish everybody a happy holiday, and you'll hear from us next week.
By the way, before you go,
Yeah.
what's your favorite holiday movie, Eric, that you would watch at home on a DVD?
Favorite holiday movie, period, like of all time?
Yeah, to watch every year. Is there one that you
Gosh.
watch every year with your family?
Well, it's weird. I mean, there's no. I have to say, there is no great Hanukkah movie, and that's it's unfortunate. I mean, I remember when Eight Crazy Nights came out, I was like, well, maybe he'll finally give us something. But it's just, I just don't come from that kind of household. I mean, I always loved something with a little kick to it. I love Bad Santa. I've come back to that frequently and enjoy the kind of
You worry me.
twistedness. But I don't treat the holiday season in any kind of sacred terms. I just want to lay low and hang out and catch up on things I haven't seen. So
So David and Nora love Christmas Story, so do I, and which has an edge to it, I would argue. And then the other one we love is Love Actually, which
okay.
isn't a great movie, by the way. I realize this,
It
but
just came around.
somehow we watch it every year. It's grown on us.
Well, I mean, there are different kinds of movies that we associate with other things that aren't the movies themselves. And if you have developed some kind of sacred relationship to Love Actually, nobody can take that from you. I wouldn't even start. So have
All
fun
right.
with that one.
Happy holidays.